In today's show, I'm going to be looking at the Minnesota Timberwolves at their 1920 season, what that means for the future, their off-season plans, all of that good stuff. Michael Bolton.
Let's get to it.
Let's get to it indeed.
You are Locked On Fantasy Basketball, your daily fantasy basketball podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball podcast brought to you by Basketball Monster. My name is Josh Lloyd and I am the lead fantasy analyst at basketballmonster.com and at Yahoo Sports Australia, and you can find me on Twitter as always at redrock_bball and on Instagram at Locked On Fantasy Basketball. The second round of the playoffs is basically done, and by the time you listen to this it will be done because the Clippers and Nuggets Game 7 will be over. So it's time to sort of transition into looking back at teams, what happened with those guys in the 1920 season, what that means moving forward, their off-season plan, all that sort of stuff as we look at season reviews. I'm going to be throwing out questions on my Instagram story and on Twitter if you have specific questions about players for these teams. So that's what we're going to do. And let's start with answering some of those questions. These come through from Instagram. First one from A. Correa says, who's the number 3 option on this team? Well, obviously we know there's Towns and Russell. I think ideally they want the number 1 pick to be that number 3 option. Otherwise, at this stage, it has to be Malik Beasley, assuming that he is coming back. Now, Beasley is a restricted free agent. He came across and had some really, really strong games for the Wolves. We'll talk about him a little bit later. But it's either going to be a mix of him initially or whoever they pick at number 1, which looks like it's going to be Anthony Edwards. That's not who I would pick there, but that looks like who it's going to be at number 1. Jamar Norrick says, and this is going to be a common question I reckon we get here, Karl-Anthony Towns' best fantasy days behind him. It seems like his 82-game guarantee is over. And this is why I talk about it all the time. And this is no shade to you, Jamar, at all, because it's a question that I get multiple times. You are injury prone, right, until you're not. And you are an ironman until you're not. Towns never missed a game, ever. Guaranteed 82 games. Guaranteed. You got to take him because he's going to play every game. You got to take him. He never misses. He'll never miss. Now this season, he plays 35 games. Oh, is that it? Is he done? Is his best days behind him? He's not even 25. He had a knee injury. Yeah, it wasn't great. Players get hurt. There isn't a miracle player who never gets hurt, and there isn't the player who consistently always gets hurt, and one season of missing some games doesn't mean that your career is rooted. Simple as that. So his best days behind him? God, no, not even close. I think he can still get better over the next 2-3 years. So this is going to be a common thing. And it's going to tie in because people are going to be like, Towns, I'm not sure. Yeah, he got injured last year. I think he might be injury prone now. And he'll fall to 6 or 7 or 8 or 9 in drafts in some situations. It is going to happen. I can 100% guarantee you. Jamar, again, nothing against you because loads of people ask this question. No. His days aren't numbered, his best fantasy seasons aren't finished, and he is not injury prone at this point. Ethan Martinez has a comment, not a question, but I'll read it anyway. Despite the Wolves having Karl-Anthony Towns, Denzel Russell, and probably Anthony Edwards, they won't make the playoffs. Yes, I agree with that 100%. Carp 321 says, do you think it would be better for the Wolves to ship their pick for fringe All-Stars role players? Absolutely not. They are not a team that is good. They are not a team that is on the edge. They are not a team that is pushing for the playoffs. You get the number 1 pick. It's not the greatest draft, but unless you get blown away by this offer, just take who you think is the best player there and build those guys around a 24-year-old Karl-Anthony Towns, a 24-year-old D'Angelo Russell, a 24-year-old Malik Beasley, a 22-year-old Jarrett Culver and Josh Kogi. Look, these are all young players, so no, you add that guy in there with them. Oak Tree Blossom says, will Juancho Hernan-Gomez have fantasy relevancy if he takes the power forward starting role? Well, he's a restricted free agent. No guarantee that he comes back. He basically started since coming over from in the trade. He was the 147th ranked player in that time, and that's without Karl-Anthony Towns. So I'm going to go ahead and say probably not. He's just not a high volume scorer. He had some good steal and block numbers, which is not usual for him. I still really like Juancho, and he was an abysmal 58% from the line. So he would have been probably a top 120, top 110 guy without that piss poor free throw percentage. But the likelihood of him coming back, being a big minute starting power forward, assuming the Wolves don't address the power forward position in free agency or in the draft, who knows what they do. No, I don't think he's... Look, he might be a guy that you take late round, but the upside with Towns and Russell and pick one and Beasley perhaps there as well, and maybe expanded role for Culver, it seems pretty limited for me. Mitchy Gray says, is Cat a top 5 player next season? I have no reason to think that he won't. He's the 4th ranked player this year. Why wouldn't he be a top 5 guy? Again, I think that is something you can almost absolutely lock in. So there are a lot of questions from Instagram. So we got some ones come through on Twitter as well. Another one here from Daniel. He says, Cat's been healthy for mostly in his career. He suffered a ton of injuries this year. Do you expect him to be taken lower? Last season, is he teetering towards a do not draft list? God, if anyone has Karl-Anthony Towns on a do not draft list, invite them to your league and proceed to pound them into fantasy dust, because that is one of the most nonsense things. Do not draft is stupid in their own right, but nobody, and Daniel is not saying he's on there. He says, I personally think he'll be fine. I agree. There's no worries for me with Towns here at all. But if anyone has him on that level, they can go and piss off. Jonathan Chown says, what trades will the Wolves make to get worse this offseason? That's a good one. They have had some questionable deals. So let's put it that way. 100% ROI. Are you high on Denzel Russell? Second rounder, maybe. Not really. No, I think second rounder is too high. Post-trade, he was the 32nd ranked player. That's a third round guy. And he did that with a 29% usage. Again, no Towns. So expecting him to maintain that usage and be that player. He's probably a 3rd to 4th round guy. Yeah, maybe you sneak him in the 3rd. I think 2nd is probably going to be pushing it though. Squeak Crow says, what is Jarrett Vanderbilt's role, if any? I think if any is the big part there, because he barely played. He played 11 games this season. I don't think he played at all as a member of the Timberwolves. He played 11 games when he was with the Nuggets. Really strong rebounder. Still got some really massive advanced numbers. But I just, where he sits in terms of Towns, one show, Naz Reid, who's probably ahead of him. Can Vanderbilt work as a power forward next to Towns? Yeah, maybe. I think there's some potential there. I reckon we're still 2 years away from Vanderbilt being a guy who's a regular rotation player. So I don't think it'll happen this year. Nurkic Circus says, what is Jimmy Johnson's 2020-21 season? And you know what? We might not get to play this sound too many more times, so let's go. He has a $16 million player option for this coming season, so he's picking that up. There's no doubt about that. He says, I can foresee him playing quite a bit next year as they push for the playoffs. He was pretty strong for them. He came across, barely played in Miami. He played 24 minutes a night and was a top 70 player post-trade deadline for the Wolves. That's another reason why I'm not sure about where Wancho sits as to what Johnson's going to do. I think, though, how old is he? He's going to be 34 by the time next season starts, Johnson. It is hard to get too excited about him, but yeah, maybe they push him into a 20, 22 minute a night role. Just depends really what else they do in free agency. Can Towns figure out defensively? I'm leaning towards no at this point. Can he improve? Yes. Will he ever be good? I'm not sure about that. And a question this is from Dale's Deadbug FF. He says, can we expect a big jump from Culver in year 2? Now, let's be honest. Jarrett Culver was terrible all season. 294th ranked player. They put him in the starting lineup. They had to take him out. He couldn't shoot. He couldn't hit free throws. He couldn't hit threes. Defensively, I thought he was pretty good. His ball handling, he's never going to be a primary ball handler. And that was some of the appeal of him coming out of college. I think he was bad. You're going to have Russell, and you're probably going to have Edwards. And if not Edwards, you're going to have Ball, most likely coming in. And then you kind of have a Kogi still there, and maybe Beasley coming back. I don't know where the hell Culver sits in that mix. I think they are out on him in a pretty big way. So no, I don't expect big numbers from him in his second year. What else have we got here? Matt Hardiman says, can Naz Reid play enough minutes to be effective? That's the question, and the answer to that is probably going to be no. Because Towns is going to be there. Now, I think Reid has a real future as a backup center. I think we're probably a couple of years away from him maybe getting a Richaun Holmes-like opportunity for another team. But this season, I don't think we're going to get massive amounts out of him. We'll talk more about him a little bit later as well. Joe Moller says, is what Malik Beasley did repeatable, assuming he re-signs? That's a good question. Now, I'm going to say no straight away. 33 minutes a night he played after coming over, 20 points per game. He had a true shooting of 60%. He hit 43% on his threes. Can he be a 40% three-point shooter? Yeah, I think he can, right? Will he play 33 minutes a night with Russell, with Edwards, with whatever else they do with that number one pick? Yeah, I think he can be 30 minutes a night, 31, maybe 28. Will he get a 23% usage when Towns is back? That's a big question, as he goes from a 1/2 option to a clear number 3 option. So I think expecting that from him is tough. And he doesn't do anything else. He doesn't get to the line, and he wasn't a great free throw shooter. He doesn't get steals. He doesn't get assists. He doesn't get block shots. His rebounds are low. He doesn't do much else apart from that really strong scoring and really good three-point shooting. And if that falls off, I'm a little bit worried about where that leads Malik Beasley. Randy Allen says, who is next year's breakout fantasy player on the Timberwolves? Well, it is hard to say at this point because we are waiting to see what this team's going to look like. Towns and Russell can't really be breakouts. They'll be sort of who they are. Beasley had that mini breakout, but again, I fear that he could regress a little bit from where he was. I think if anyone's going to take that big step forward, you have to look at the second-year player, like Jarrett Culver, but I just don't really believe in him. And if we're talking about Beasley, if we're talking about Russell, if we're talking about Edwards / Ball coming in there as well, if we're talking about a Kogi who outplayed Culver all season and is only like 6 months older than Culver, despite having an extra year of experience in the NBA, I'm just not sure. But if it's going to be on a larger perspective, it's going to be someone that breaks out. It probably is going to be Culver if he just demands to have that starting small forward role, because he could do that. They could run, I guess you'd probably want Edwards and Beasley to have the 2 and the 3, but you could see Culver push for that role, so there is an opportunity there for him. But on a smaller level, I reckon a bloke to watch out for is Jalen Noel. This is for very deep leagues. I really think he's got an opportunity to work his way into a 10th, 11th man role. We saw Keelan Martin have some success playing that role for this team this year. Noel can play up at the 3 a little bit as well. I think he's a guy to watch for very deep leagues. Maybe he pushes into a rotation role. And I wouldn't be surprised to see one of a Kogi or Culver dealt either this offseason or at some point in the next season. Built Bar is back. New flavors, the best tasting protein bar. What the hell else could you want with your money? Because Built Bar tastes exactly like a candy bar. Other protein bars, it literally tastes like they've picked sawdust up off the floor of a saloon that people have been spitting in and putting their peanut shells in. Who wants that? Why wouldn't you want a peanut bar? No, you want a protein bar that tastes just like a candy bar. 6 new flavors: caramel brownie, cookies and cream, cherry barcia, lemon almond cheesecake, apple almond crisp, and carrot cake. To go along with the 12 originals, the OGs, all these bars are covered in 100% chocolate and they are soft and easy to chew. Low calorie, low sugar, high protein, and high fiber. Great to lose weight, great to maintain weight when you're exercising and you're trying to shed off some of these quarantine pounds. The Cherry Barcia bar has 17 grams of protein and a measly 130 calories and just 4 grams of sugar. So if you go to BuiltBar.com, use the promo code LOCKEDON, you'll get $10 off your next order. That's the promo code is LOCKEDON for $10 off at BuiltBar.com. I reckon it's a bunch of questions. So let's actually get in and talking about these players now for the Timberwolves in a little bit more detail. The first guy we want to talk about is, of course, Karl-Anthony Towns. He was the 4th ranked player this season. His advanced stats were all best on this team. His PIPM 3.39, which is a pretty strong number. Really good Raptor as well. His true shooting was 64%. He had a 29% usage. And that's why I worry a little bit about what Beasley and what Russell do, because they put up good numbers in that situation when Towns was injured. And when he comes back, the touches need to go to one of the best offensive centers in the NBA, and that is Towns. One of the best shooting centers in NBA history in Towns. So they need to get the ball. So there's going to be reductions in what those guys do. Maybe that helps Russell in terms of his efficiency because he was just a 40% shooter in the time in Minnesota. But there is still some concern about how that all works out and how that pairing works because we haven't seen it yet. So Towns has been ridiculously good. He's a guy that I think that we just absolutely lock in as a top 5 fantasy player for the next, he's 24, as I said, for the next 4 years. probably 5 years, really comfortably. So when you're drafting in a dynasty league, I think you should be having 5-year windows when you're considering, 3 to 5 year windows, depending on where your draft position sits. Sometimes you can push older if you're in a spot where the young guys get taken early. But he's a guy that really shouldn't be escaping any sort of top 5-ish discussion. Again, he's only 24. There's still lots and lots to come from Karl-Anthony Towns. Next up, it is his good mate, his now teammate that he hasn't played with on the court in a Minnesota Timberwolves, and that is D'Angelo Russell, who, let's be fair, he was pretty bad as a member of the Golden State Warriors. He was better with the Wolves, but overall, he was the 40th ranked player, which is okay. The problem with him is a lot of his advanced numbers are poor. Negative PIPM, negative Raptor. Look, that's not good for a guy who should have been leading that Warriors team and then really should have been leading that Timberwolves team when he came over. 55.6 true shooting. Overall, his usage was 32%. When he was with the Timberwolves, it did dip a little bit to 29%. I think it probably can come to like 27, 28 maybe when he is a member, when he does play with Karl-Anthony Towns. We addressed it earlier. Someone talking about maybe second round. I just don't see it. His ADP last year was 39th. I think he's probably going to be in that 35 to 48 sort of range. So back end third, mostly fourth round player. In his 10 games for Minnesota, 21, 5, and 6. 1.5 steals, 3 triples. 85 from the line. Now that's really good because he's been a poor free throw shooter at times. He needs to get to the line a lot more. That's the difference for Russell. If he gets there instead of 5 times a game, 7 times a game, and hits 80 plus, then he is a top 30 player. But we haven't seen that from him. He's one of the worst point guards in terms of getting to the line that we've seen. These high volume guys, he just doesn't do it. He takes a lot of shots, and that can lead to his percentages coming down. But D'Angelo Russell, a guy that that's some of that value in terms of his advanced stuff is pretty rough. So he's one of those guys that can put up numbers and looks flashy, but is he actually contributing to winning? I've got some advanced stuff that I'm looking at. I'm not ready to fully disclose what it is in terms of dynasty value of these guys. He still comes out as the second highest ranked long-term dynasty player on this team. In terms of just total value over the next few years, but still he's still probably a couple of years away from his overall peak best season. I think we're probably a couple of years away from where he can really push up into that age 26, 27 type period. But there is that risk with him that he is good stats, bad team guy, and that if the team ever starts to get good, it won't be necessarily because of him, and he may fade into a smaller role. I think that is a risk, I think, with D'Angelo Russell when you're considering him for long-term value. James Johnson, 175th ranked player this season. He, as I said, struggled a little bit this year, only played 21 games as a member of the Miami Heat, played 11 for the Timberwolves, but 175th ranked player because he was the 66th ranked player as a member of the Wolves. And after that trade deadline, when they got rid of Robert Covington and brought in Russell and brought in Beasley and brought in Hernan Gomez and really cleaned house, he was the second best fantasy player on this team, ahead of Malik Beasley, 66th ranked player. How was he able to do that? Well, he did it in true Jimmy Johnson style. 13 points, that's not that good. 1-3, that's not that good. 5 boards, almost 4 assists, 1.2 steals, 1.5 blocks, 51% shooting. There it is. Blocks, steals, assists from a power forward position, good field goal percentage. That is why he was able to be successful. But as I said earlier, he's 34 years of age. He's got 1 year left on this deal. And after this deal is done, he is a guy to me that screams prime buyout candidate, or the Timberwolves could just waive him at any point this season. They said, look, we've got to pay this $16 million anyway. If we can't get rid of you, you're probably just clogging things up for one show or for whoever else we want to play in that position. That I'm not sure that he's actually on this team all season. And then I think he becomes a minimum salary player at the age of 34 to 35. In terms of his advanced stuff, his PIPM was actually not that different to a D'Angelo Russell's, which is a little bit concerning, negative 0.79. Raptor viewed him much worse, a true shooting of 57 and a usage of just 19%, which was up at 22% as a member of the Timberwolves, something that he's probably not going to be able to maintain that level of usage. So he's not a guy that we should be looking at as any sort of long-term option. I think he's probably got this year left, and maybe it's only half a year left of being maybe a rotation player. For as good as he can be, he didn't look great in Miami. He had a bit of a resurgence in Minnesota, but he's 34. And players who are role players at age 34 don't often maintain high levels of production through that age group, and I think we could see some real drop-off from James coming in the next season or two. Let's talk Jordy Mclaughlin. I'm going down here the list of these players in terms of what their overall season fantasy rank was on a per-game basis, and Mclaughlin was 191st ranked player because he was really good when he played, and that was mainly because of his assists. Now, the worry, I guess, here is what the hell happens with Mclaughlin long term. He is a restricted free agent coming up after being a two-way guy. He's 191st ranked player this year, negative 0.59 PIPM. Still negative, but that's not bad. Plus 2.6 Raptor is huge. 59 true shooting is massive. Usage 16%. He was really, really good. His G League PIPM was bigger than anybody else on this Timberwolves team, 3.27. The advanced stats loved him, and I really was impressed with what I saw from him on the court. Now, he's 24 as well, but getting those assist numbers, and when he started in place of D'Angelo Russell, I thought that he was impressive. I thought he put up some really good numbers. I thought that he looked like he could be a solid backup point guard in the NBA for 3 or 4 year period, one of those sort of players. Now, if they draft LaMelo Ball, then his role is probably going to drop off. But he started two games, right? 35 minutes, 20 points, 11 assists. He shot 67% in those games, which is never going to continue. But it's the distribution from him, his ability to run an offense, which is what I was really impressed with. So if we're looking at players in terms of, hey, maybe something can happen with this guy in the future and maybe he has some solid, couple of top 200 years, I think that's a possibility with Mclaughlin, who probably is a couple of years away still from peaking. And I think can have some impact over the next couple of years. But high end, it's probably not going to be there. The next player we look at is Josh Kogi, the 192nd ranked player over the course of the season. I thought he started out this season terribly, but did improve after that. 25 minutes a night for Kogi, under 9 points with 4 rebounds. The shot was rough, like 27% from three is just not going to cut it. And he doesn't take them either, 2.5 attempts per game. And as a wing, where are we at with Kogi? I think defensively he can be really good. 1.1 steals in 25 minutes is not bad. He got his free throws up to 80%, which is encouraging for a guy that shoots as poorly as he does to actually get that level happening. He had a positive assist to turnover ratio, which for a guy that's not a good passer is a win. But I just struggle to see what he's going to do well. Will he ever be a high volume scorer? Probably not. Will he ever be an assist guy? No. Will he ever hit threes? Probably not. Steals is where it's going to be. And that can always inflate guys' fantasy rankings. And that is a concern, I guess, if he does find his way into a 30-minute-a-night role, he gets 1.6 steals and people start looking at him as a guaranteed top 90 player. And I'm not really sure about that. Negative 1.9 PIPM and negative 1.8 Raptors, pretty rough. 55 true shooting and 15 usage. Not the greatest numbers there for Kogi, but a guy that's still quite a way away from being able to peak. But I'm not really sure he's going to be a massive contributor to winning long term. But again, I gave you that number that I had before, or the things that I'm working on in terms of value over the long term. And in terms of the players on this squad, he does come out as, I think, the 4th most valuable over the next 5 years in terms of total value. So that's at least something worth looking at or considering, but I don't really think that he has a super high peak as he moves forward. Let's talk about Malik Beasley now, a guy who really was in a season of two halves. Really, at Denver Nuggets, where he wasn't really part of the rotation, the shooting fell off. And I've said this so many times before, is that sometimes shooting is so confidence related. And if you're in a bad situation and you don't want to be there and the coach doesn't want to play you, then the shots don't go in. Then he moved to Minnesota and everything went in. He went bananas. He averaged 33 minutes a night. He hit 20 points a game, over 3 triples, 43% from 3. He can be a 40% three-point shooter. But what the hell else does he do? He doesn't get to the line. He doesn't get steals, doesn't get assists, doesn't get blocks. And if he's not getting that level of usage and hitting those shots at that level, and even then, I would say that Beasley scoring 20 points per game in 33 minutes is close to the best case scenario for him. And he was the 91st ranked fantasy player without Towns. He can still get better. There's no doubt about that. But his advanced numbers were relatively rough. A negative 2.14 PIPM is bad. It's the worst of everyone that I've mentioned so far. A negative 1.8 Raptor is not that good. His value moving forward doesn't look super good. And I think the writing on the wall of drafting Anthony Edwards for this team makes his role a little bit cloudy. And the free agency market is going to be absolutely shit house this year. So I think he's going to get squeezed a lot. Who's going to pay up to make him their starting shooting guard? I'm a little worried about where he sits. And I reckon I could be wrong on this. And this is one where I'm going back and forth on where Beasley sits. But it does feel to me like he is a guy whose value is probably at its highest it's going to get to at this point. A guy that came across, played 10 games, shot the lights out, everyone Dutch rutted him, 20 points per game. If you're looking to cash in a dynasty chip now on Malik Beasley, I don't think I'd be adverse to it. If you can get a top 100-ish type player back, if I set the over-under of the amount of top 100 seasons Malik Beasley has from here on out at 1.5, I might actually take the under on that. I'm not sure he's got the best overall fantasy game. Now, he's a guy that's improved significantly throughout his career. The shooting has been great. I think he can do some decent things defensively. But I just worry about what his overall absolute upside is on this team. 55 true shooting over the course of the season wasn't great. 22 usage. Again, not that strong. But in that time that he did spend with Minnesota, his true shooting went all the way up to 60%. Just shows you how bad he was as a member of the Denver Nuggets this season. The next player we look at is the Wizard, Omari Spelman, the 241st ranked player. He played 49 games this season, Spelman, but didn't play any in a Minnesota uniform. He was a guy that I thought sort of started to figure some stuff out. As a member of the Golden State Warriors, he averaged 8 points with 5 rebounds, half a steal, half a block. True shooting still 55%, which isn't great, but the advanced stuff was relatively rough on Spelman, but he looked much better this season than what he did as a rookie, and I think that's at least encouraging for him. He had some pretty good G League PIPM numbers, 3.29. Actually, I erroneously said that McLaughlin had the best PIPM in the G League out of this squad. It was actually Spelman, 3.29 versus 3.27, so a bee's dick in it, but yeah, relatively close there. I think Spelman's still probably 2 to 3 years away from reaching his absolute peak. And I could see him fitting in as somewhat of a stretch big. 39% from 3, almost a 3 per game in those 18 minutes is not a bad return. And yeah, blocking a shot per game, there is some upside there in Spelman, but there are some other players on this team in those positions that I would rather have over him. One of those players is Naz Reid, the 250th ranked player this season. The advanced stats absolutely loved Reedy. He was really, really strong in terms of just being a big usage sort of a guy with Karl-Anthony Towns down. Now, he's only 21 years of age. He is the youngest player on this team at this point. He averaged 9 points and 4 rebounds in under 17 minutes with 0.7 blocks. He hit over a 3 a game. He only hit him at 33%, and his true shooting for a big man is atrocious at 51%, but a positive PIPM, a big positive Raptor number, 24 usage is pretty impressive as well for a big man like that. And he is a guy that, 3-4 years away probably from really reaching his peak, and I think he can get to a pretty decent level, as I said, like a Richaun Holmes as a starting center on a team that probably does have a top 100 fantasy season in him at some point. His G League numbers were impressive as well. I think there's quite a bit to like about Naz Reid. Now, he started 11 games, and he played 25 minutes a game in those. But before we get too excited about that, he was ranked 203rd out of everyone as a starter during that time in those 11 games. Like that's not 143rd. I don't know where I read 205 from. 143rd in that time. 25 minutes a game, 12.7 rebounds. He almost was a triple one player, 0.9 threes, 1.2 steals, 1.1 blocks. That's pretty good. But just horrible shooting. 66 from the line, 41% from the field, 28% from 3 on a 21% usage. High usage, low efficiency is a pretty bad combination, especially for a big man. And that's the worry, I guess, with Reid, whether those things... He's not afraid to shoot it. I thought he played some okay defense and rim protection sort of stuff from Reid. And the advanced stuff really does like him. I'd take him over a Spelman as we move forward. But there are still some worries about how that actually transitions in the NBA. Jake Layman, Don't really need to talk too much about Jakey. Only 23 games with that toe injury pretty much all season. 9 points for him on 45% shooting, a 54 true shooting. PIPM was rough, negative 1.19. Raptor was worse. His fantasy rank was 262nd. I think he's a guy they should be looking to get out of the rotation, to be honest. Giving more Culver, getting more Kogi, getting more number one draft pick. Hernan Gomez, if they're bringing back Beasley. I just don't really see the appeal of Layman. I don't know what he does well. I don't know what he does. That's as simple as that. I think he should be a guy that you have as if, hey, I've lost a wing, and you're someone who you need to throw in there for 10, 15 minutes a night in case of emergency. And that's really it for Layman. I just don't see that appeal for him. He has very limited upside, in my opinion. This is the guy that everyone wants to hear about, and it's Jarrett Culver, because he was atrocious. 294th ranked player this year. PIPM was a negative 1.71, and the Raptor was a horrendous negative 3.8. His true shooting was under 47, and his usage was 19%. He did make some starts this season, and then was benched again. He averaged 9 points with 3 rebounds and 1.7 assists. 40 from the field, 46 from the line, which is horrible. 30% from 3 on 3.5 attempts per game. But he did start to get some stuff figured out as the season went on. In his starts, he did start 35 games somehow for this team. He averaged 10 points with 4 rebounds and a steal. That's still not great, but we got a little bit there in terms of being able to score at a higher volume. But the fact that he just could not hit free throws all season is troubling. Now, post-trade, no Towns. Did he do anything different with Russell there? Not really. I guess the only thing I can say that's a positive, and this just goes to show how bad his three-point shooting was beforehand, he shot 42% after the All-Star break from 3. Still only a 30% shooter for the year. That gives you some level of encouragement. But when that happened, his steal numbers dropped off, his defensive stuff dropped off, he doesn't get assists, and I think that this team they haven't moved on, but they've gone, we picked him number 6. We hoped he could be a ball handler, a wing who can defend, who can score. And I think they've gone, maybe not. Absolutely maybe not. Beasley, Russell, pick number 1, Kogi. These guys are all ahead of him. And that's a real worry for Culver. Now, the advanced stuff still does like him long term, even though the numbers this year were relatively rough, because a lot of the things that I'm working on here does assume that he will get some big minutes in the future. But I think his absolute peak is limited, and I don't really fully believe in these numbers for Jarrett Culver. The shooting problems are too much. The appeal of him having a decent assist from the wing seems limited at this point, and I'm just not sure where he fits. I didn't really like the pick at the time, and he has failed to live up to any sort of expectation that really anyone should have had for him. Keelan Martin, don't need to really talk too much about Keelan here. He is a restricted free agent coming up. Negative 1.67 PIPM and negative 5 Raptor. He was the 345th ranked fantasy player. He had some decent moments, but realistically, at 25 years of age, this is probably going to be the best it is for Martin in terms of production. 39% shooter. I think he only missed 1 free throw or 2 free throws all year. Pretty strong in that area, but just not a long-term piece. You might be wondering where Juancho Hernan Gomez is. Well, here he is, because he was the 361st ranked player this year, because his time in Denver, like Malik Beasley, was terrible. Now, he was pushed into the starting lineup in Minnesota as the starting power forward, and he was the 147th ranked player post-trade deadline. 29 minutes a game in 11 games, 12 points, 8 rebounds, 2 threes, a steal, 46%, and an absolutely atrocious 58% from the free throw line. He had a low usage, 16% in that time, 15.7 over the course of the season. His PIPM was rough. Raptor liked him a little bit more. Now, I still like Hernan Gomez. I still think he can be a pretty strong player. But in terms of his overall fantasy value, he's a restricted free agent. I think they will bring him back. I don't think we should be viewing him as a long-term starting power forward option or a long-term top 100 fantasy option, really. He had that opportunity to really push and be a top 120, top 100 guy. But it didn't happen. You're not going to get too many better opportunities than that. I'd like to see how he works next to Towns. But those sort of guys, you need to start bringing big steal numbers or big block numbers or be a passer or be a high-volume three-point shooter when you can work without usage. But at this point, he's a low-usage player who has low numbers in other areas as well. And that is not a recipe for good fantasy stuff for Juancho Hernan Gomez, so not high on him. Evan Turner, look rough. 367th ranked player. Advanced stuff is terrible. True shooting of 42% is horrible. Turner is 32 years of age. Maybe he gets some veteran minimum contracts. I don't think did he even play for Minnesota? No, he didn't even play for Minnesota. I don't think that he is worth considering even as an NBA player at this point moving forward, unfortunately. Speaking of not NBA players, Jacob Evans was terrible this season. The 410th ranked player had an opportunity in Golden State to be a point guard. They were trying to transition him into that. That did not work at all. He averaged 1 assist per game in 14 minutes. The shooting was horrible, 44% true shooting. Raptor, negative 6.3, negative 3 PIPM. I think that Jacob Evans will get his fourth-year rookie option declined, and I think he'll be out of the league. He was unbelievably horrible. He played just 1 game and 3 minutes for the Timberwolves after coming over in the trade. They did not value him at all. This is a young player who was a first-round pick 2 years ago. He's 23 years of age, and this is a rebuilding team that said, "Nah, we're good. We'll run with Jake Layman and Keelan Martin over you." That is a massive red flag as to how they value Evans, and I think that his future in the NBA is decidedly murky. Jalen Noel. Now, this is a guy that I think has some interest. Noel, PRPM negative 0.42, which is not bad. Now, it's a low sample size, so that does help there. But a negative 0.8 Raptor is encouraging as well. Some of his future projection stuff is pretty interesting. He was a positive in terms of G League PIPM, not at the level of Spelman or McLaughlin, but still pretty positive. He didn't do much at the big level. 10 minutes a game, 4 points with 36% shooting. But I think there is some value in him to develop maybe into a 10th man at some point. Now, it's not a high ceiling, but there is some appeal there in Noel to at least be a rotation level player. I thought he showed some flashes, and to be honest, at times he showed more than what Culver did. I don't think that he's a better prospect than Culver at all, but I thought there was enough there at age 21 to try and develop him. And the last player that we talk about is Jarrett Vanderbilt, 475th ranked player. Only 11 games did he play, none of those with Minnesota. Negative 0.42 PIPM, but the Raptor was horrible, and he had a true shooting of 68%. The Raptor was negative 10, which is terrible. Usage at 15%. What this guy does is he gets rebounds, but he played 4 minutes a game. 1 point, 0.8 rebounds, 63% shooting. Really, really hard to judge where he is. Can he be a fit next to Towns? I hope they tried a little bit this season, but I reckon we're still a couple of years away from Vanderbilt really being a player who they throw into a rotation. And with guys like Reed and Spelman, showing little bits and pieces there, Hernan Gomez still around. I'm just not really sure what his long-term future is. But if we're taking our flyers on guys, I think if you're taking a flyer between him and One Show, I don't know. I think Vanderbilt's upside's probably higher, 4 years younger as well. But I think that he's just going to be an energy 15-minute-a-night sort of player rather than someone who plays 30 minutes a night at this point. That'll do it for today's Timberwolves season review. Let me know what you think down below in the comments. Give it a thumbs up, and why don't you hit subscribe as well on YouTube and on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, 5-star reviews all around. Guys, we are done here. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. See ya.